Welcome to the meeting regarding how theses work in the ICE program. This should be a relatively short one where I'll just sort of let Professor Owen start by explaining what the thesis is for, both for the curriculum, but for your own personal educational growth, I guess. After that, I'll sort of pick up and sort of walk through systematically what the thesis comprises of. So let me just stop there, turn over to Professor Owens, and he can sort of walk through why we think this is not uh, it's worth more than just a senior seminar and an elective, which is the alternative option.
Yeah, good. Great to see you guys. Thanks for stopping in, and thanks for those who are going to watch on our YouTube thread, our YouTube channel. Professor Nakazato and I have worked together for a long time now on the thesis program, and as thesis director, he's got all sorts of insights about the process and the way students work and things like that. But I like to start these meetings by talking a little bit about why you might want to consider writing a thesis. I talk about this with all my advisees when I get them, whether they're freshman prospective IS students or sophomores or juniors as well, to try to encourage people to be thinking about what a extended research project might look like. And first, at the outset of it, I'll say that at its core, it is what it is. It's an extended independent research project, which provides all sorts of freedom for you to follow your own sense of what's important to you. I often talk to students about when they're thinking about topics of trying to imagine what are some of the push factors that might lead you to do a big project like this, things that you feel moved away from, things that make you mad, injustices in the world, or a problem that seems knotty that needs to be addressed, or a situation that just seems complex and you want to untangle it and find some way through to it. There's also pull factors, things that you find beautiful or compelling or important, whether that's a role model, an intellectual, moral, spiritual, political role model, someone who's done something important or interesting in the world that you'd like to learn more about, or a situation where you see resilience or progress or success among a community or a group or a nation or a region in ways that you want to understand better. So there's both these sort of things that make you feel like you want to learn more because it's important and difficult or you're mad about, but there's also things that you might find super compelling that you'd like to dig into. And a year-long independent project is one in which you really get to set most of your boundaries about how you approach those topics. The second big thing about it, the nature of it, is that you aren't simply independent. You are working under the close supervision and mentorship of an accomplished scholar, a faculty member in our program, or affiliated with. It really can be anywhere at BC, but usually it's affiliated with our program. Someone with expertise in both the methods, particular methods of how to ask certain questions. If you're interested in one topic, how do you go about imagining what the question is you'd like to study? How would you like to circle the topic and find a way in? What tools do you want to use? Philosophical tools, statistical tools, argumentative, logic-based tools, empirical studies, et cetera. What kinds of data do you need? What kinds of information will you make sense of, and how will you put it together? These are method questions. And then there'll be content experts usually in the area that you're researching also, so they can provide guidance for you as to what you might need to be reading and what are the big schools of thought to take into account and what is new, what does the cutting edge of these research fields look like? What are important schools of thinking and things that you might want to push against or find yourself amenable to? So a faculty mentor can help you understand both content and method. And in working with them over the course of the year, you not only learn those things, which are really interesting and important, and I'll say in a minute why they can be important post-grad, but you're learning about your topic, you're learning how to do these methods, but you're also working closely with a faculty member and learning what it is they do, what makes them so interesting and so successful that they've been working at Boston College on this. This is and so you'll be in a great mentor-mentee relationship. And then we can look at what kinds of there are intrinsic benefits to that. Just that relationship is usually terrific and can be really meaningful to you. And then as we look post-grad, we can say, A, you'd acquire a certain set of skills in what you're doing. You learn about these research methods. You'll be learning how to manage a large project, broken down into pieces, spread out over time. And that skill set is useful in any sort of employment context, learning how to do big things in small steps. Working closely with someone, doing a deep research project. These are all things that will have a benefit to you. And of course, your faculty member will know you quite well and will be someone who will write letters for you, recommendations and things like that for fellowships, for graduate schools, for employment, et cetera. So having a very close relationship to a faculty member can be really helpful on that front. Academically speaking or professionally, we feel that writing a thesis is especially important for people who want to be going to an academic graduate program, getting a master's in regional studies or in a language or even international studies, things like that. But maybe a little bit less necessary for a professional graduate degree like law school or public policy school or things like that, where the focus is on your professional development as opposed to deep research skills within a particular area. So it's never not helpful, but it's also not required for things like that. So I wouldn't want to say that you need to write a thesis to go to law school, for example, or something like that. But for all the reasons I mentioned before, it can be extremely helpful. The last thing I'll say is that usually around 2/3 of our students don't write a thesis, sometimes 3/4, depending on the year. And so if you decide you don't want to do this, you would, be in the majority of our students. But the ones who do write them, it's a pretty cool experience. And you have to think ahead about what it will ask of you. Would you like to, do you have the discipline to do this kind of project? And if not, would you like to acquire the discipline to do this kind of project? How would you feel about that? How does it fit into your other classes, et cetera? We love it when they complement each other. So using your language skills, for example, using materials and expertise you've gained from other courses throughout your time at BC or your time abroad, really is a good thing to accelerate your attempts to work on a project plan or a proposal for the thesis. So I'll stop there. And Professor Nakazato can talk about the process that's happening here, what your timelines ought to be, et cetera. But when he's done, I'm happy to chat more about any of these things that I've raised. So
And then
thanks a
after
lot.
that, if students have any questions, we'll try to answer them then. Again, this is sort of meant for everybody. I mean, you're the three who logged in, but there's other students who have already indicated they do want to write a thesis, but they can't. They're in classes now, either at BC or abroad, whatever reason. So briefly, what I'm going to do is go over, as Professor Owen says, the process. These are the things I'm going to cover. Most of them very quickly, one extra page, and just get over it. The proposal sort of slows down because that's what I want to talk about the most. Okay. Suitable topics. Basically, we're the international studies program. There's no explicit guidelines on the website, or if you ask me on what counts. Basically, just make it international. That's all I ask. Okay. I mean, that's why you're in the international studies program. And by international component, broadly defined, if you want to talk about migration in the United States, there's an implicit, well, they're coming from somewhere else. And okay, I'll let that go. Quite often, most of our students make a clearly international component defined. So that's not really a big deal, but that's at a minimum. If you just want to talk about, I don't know, something that's pretty much purely interior to the United States, the US policy regarding Native Americans, yeah, we're not the right program for that. Okay. So you don't have to work in your concentrations. If you are a PEDS concentration student, you can choose a topic that's more, say, aligned with CC or vice versa. However, you might have to keep in mind who you want as an advisor then. Okay, a PEDS track student working with an econ prof should be expected. The professor may well sort of want to know how you're going to approach this from the skill sets they have. And so if that's not really your thing, we need to place you with somebody else who's either adaptable or, more conformable to the way you want to approach a problem. Okay, that's it. Advisors and readers. Professor Owens already mentioned this. Basically, we're not a department, we're a program. And so we rely on other departments and schools to provide advising. Basically, anybody at BC is fine with me, okay? We've even had non-BC faculty do this. In the past, a student might have gone abroad, like some of you have gone or are now, made a good sort of rapport with somebody, come back to BC and say, can I keep working with that other professor? We've let that happen just a handful of times, one or two, but also off-campus people have been acceptable to me. But basically, and Professor Owens kind of touched on this, different advisors take their role differently. Okay, some are very hands-on, others a little detached. And if you kind of need hand-holding, I'll try to keep that in mind when I suggest who we might want to contact. Some faculty are very dedicated to making sure you learn how to do research. Okay. Um, it's possible not necessarily to have a second reader. The way I sort of point out is talk to everybody about your topic. You might be working with professors, say Medlin, he's our new hire, but you can talk to me, you can talk to Professor White, you can talk to Professor Owens. Just say, this is what I'm working on. You'd be surprised at the sort of people who have some knowledge to contribute. Frequently asked questions. Next bit, length. This is the part where a lot of students panic, but the answer is basically there's no specific length for an IS thesis. Some faculty actually prefer short, concise theses. Professor Bob Ross of the Political Science Department says the most important skill, at least academically speaking, for an undergraduate is to learn how to write a journal length article. Because if you're going to go to grad school, you need to start getting published. And so he just wants a very tight 30 to 40 pages. The general observation I make is you take however long you need to take. The the hallway to the back of Connolly House on the second floor has sort of our library of theses, and some are relatively thin, some are monstrously thick. And it's basically what you need to, take to say your story. ISPED's concentration, we have some fairly short ones where they're doing a lot of econometrics, and therefore 40 to 50 pages will, say a lot because it's really the numbers and graphs doing the talking. The picture's worth 1,000 words is kind of a truism there. Everybody else, 70 to 100, and that's kind of lowballing, but I'm trying not to scare people away. That's actually quite easy. If you have like a 5-page introduction and then 10 pages, let me bring you up to speed. And there's Professor Owens. Then let me tell you 10 more pages of what other scholars have done. Let me give you in about 5 to 8 pages how I'm going to tackle the problem, and then a couple of chapters of your argument, and you're out. This can be done. Like if you imagine every one of these is 5 to 10 pages, you'll hit 70 no problem. And quite often it's quite a bit higher than that. Okay, so that's the low end average. There is an option called Scholar of the College. It's for students with high GPAs, high cumulative GPAs, and they're usually double that length. It's again, we've also had non-scholar college projects that are this length. And that's just again a matter of you take as long as you need to tell your story. Let me go to citation method just to quickly go into this. We don't care is the basic answer. Okay. Again, you can sort of guess. A lot of this is I don't care. Just quite often follow the guidance of what your advisor suggests. So, for example, if you're doing a humanities-oriented thesis, you're working with somebody in English, they may say, we'd like you to use MLA, the Modern Languages Association method. The social science crowd, we kind of generally prefer a Chicago method, not Chicago manual style, pardon. If the advisor doesn't care, just pick a method, stick with it. Okay. I like this because you can always put in footnotes commentary, asides, extra points that don't quite fit the immediate narrative of the thesis. So that's my preference. But again, I don't care what my students use either. Grading, just so you know quickly. Uh, Basically, this is the interesting point. We use a central registry system, and this is because you could be working with somebody in the law school, we had that, or the School of Nursing, or the Graduate School of Social Work. And it's just impossible to sort of herd all of those different faculty. So you basically register under my name. So it looks like I'm doing a lot of the work, but in fact, you're working with whoever you actually have. And what I do, therefore, is I'm the uh, what is it? What's the term? Basically I put all the grades in, okay? I'm the faculty of last sort of I put the grades in on your behalf, on their behalf. So yeah, I contact your advisor at the end of the year and obtain a grade for you. Okay. I have no particular say. If they say it's AA, I won't challenge that. If they say it's B plus B plus, I won't challenge that either. You may want to talk it out with your advisor. Okay. And the grade covers both semesters. What you get in the fall semester is a J grade. That's sort of what I call the incomplete with a long tail. And that just means the J stays a J grade all the way until May. Normally, an I grade turns to a fail by, say, March. In this case, you sort of have that hanging grade from the fall just lingering till the end. It's no big deal. And a split grade can be given. We've had faculty said B plus in the fall, A in the spring. And again, I just put those letters in. So that's grading. Deadlines. This is kind of what Professor Owens and I have talked about, worked about, thought about. We do try to have hard deadlines. Let me just go over these. There are hard deadlines. I need proposals by mid-September, okay? If nothing else, I would prefer them earlier. Like I would prefer students to be working on proposals now, contacting faculty now, sort of securing faculty now. Mainly because a lot of faculty are in high demand, not just in the IS program, but other majors might want them. So for example, Professor Krauss deals with political science majors, IS majors. Sometimes he might get a crossover, but the point is a lot of faculty are popular with students or their topics are, and that means they're just in high demand. So getting them early really helps. This, though, is more or less the same thing. I need to know you have a game plan by mid-September, and that's kind of late, but that's sort of the hard deadline. Okay. Otherwise, you know what? Switch to a seminar. Okay. By mid-September, I'm sort of saying before drop ad, effectively. Or we just turn the thesis retroactively into a one semester, 3 credit study. Just do that, you're done. That's basically done under my supervision, the independent study. The other one, I need you to nail down an advisor by the end of September. What I will do at the end of the summer, start of the semester, is send sort of what we call a thesis contract. Basically, it's you and your advisor agreeing, here's what we both agreed to. Okay, so I need these basically the first month of school. And again, if you don't, you're doing an independent study. Okay, so this is, as Professor Owens says, very much an independent process. You have to take an initiative. I will help you, but you have to secure advisor on your own. You have to get a proposal on your own. You have to make sure you have a game plan with your advisor. Okay, so it's you, you, you. Again, I'm there to help, but again, this is something that requires self-initiative. Okay, again, in either case, you're not writing a thesis, but this will clear your senior year requirements. That's the main thing. You aren't required to now do a seminar. Okay, and this is basically failure to launch, and it rarely happens, but sometimes it does. And if you want to prevent that, start now. Work with me now. Talk about your topics now. Let's think about potential advisors now. So I keep saying now, 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 because really you need to hit the ground running in September. Next thing, other deadlines, this is soft and hard. I kind of want students to have stuff done by mid-November. Okay, by this point, you've got a chance to work, research, take notes. Well, turn it to something tangible. I always go for basically what I call low-hanging fruit, like the foundational stuff. Like if you have a topic you're talking about, I don't know, EU accession. How do states join? There's just basically books and articles out there that explain the process. Well, summarize that for me. That's no actual research. That's a book report. That can't be that hard. You can also talk about other scholars think. That's what we call the literature review. Okay, now it goes back to what Professor Owen said. What are the theories out there? And there are different ways to look at that. How and why do states want to join? What's the reason they would join an international organization, that kind of thing. So there's scholarship out there that's what again call low-hanging fruit because it's just basic stuff you need to know before you can get to the meat of your topic. Okay, mid-December, again, make sure you have an argument. This is where I hope to go. Okay, I call it the rough draft of your argument or your research design chapters. That should be written. Okay, you might sort of negotiate with your advisor. Can I do some other chapters instead? Yeah, I don't care. But I suggest these are the easy ones, or easier at least. And the having your research design fleshed out, even if it's subject to change, gives you at least sort of a roadmap. Here's what I need to do next. Start of April. This is the point. April, we're talking now, April 1st, today. You should be done. Okay. A lot of students aren't, but this is the goal you're looking for. You're not thinking, I've got till the end of the semester. No, you've got till today, next year. Okay, that way the professor now has a couple weeks to read all the chapters. Ideally, you're not dumping everything on your professor advisor now. You've been doing it in dribs and drabs, and it's finally here at this point, you push everything across. Here's everything now. Just read the new stuff I've got, but see how it blends in with the old stuff you've already been reading. Okay. And then by mid-April, you should be actually done. The advisors had a chance to give you feedback. You've managed to incorporate them by mid-April. So we're talking 2 weeks from today, April 15th, you're done. Okay. These are the sort of ideal. In case you're wondering, um, a lot of students don't make these deadlines, but this is what you really need to aim for. Okay. Lastly, by the start of May, you are complete and you give me a bound copy. Again, if you go to the hallway towards our where our student workers are, there's our little library, and they're all bound. And that's basically it. So those are the deadlines you need to keep in mind. Okay. This is a rigorous self-initiated process, and you have to be, hard on yourself, get stuff done. And the first two are soft. If you end up writing other stuff, I'm fine. But you need these three last ones in mind. By the start of April, you're done. Rough draft, first draft. By the middle of April, you are completely done. Okay. And then again, at the end of the month, start of May, you have something tangible to hand in. All right, there's some other deadlines you might want to know about again. Uh, Sometimes like in December, students will say, I'm not feeling it anymore. I thought I was going to go and excited. Don't feel like it. That's fine. We can retroactively change. So this can happen after drop add. And we've had that happen. Or students say, I've had a crisis in the family or medical emergency. I've suffered a concussion. I can't keep doing this. Fine. We'll just turn your thesis into independent research. Okay. Also, if you are doing really well in your topic, more than we expected, like, wow, you're pumping out material, it's actually first class for an undergrad research. If your GPA is high enough, your advisor, I might recommend, do you want to consider doing a Scholar of College project? Okay, these are basically 9 credit theses in this set. It's 3 credits in the first semesters, but we give you 6 in the second semester. Okay, it's also possible to go with Scholar College from the day one. That's a 12 credits, 6 in the fall, 6 in the spring. But there are some deadlines involved with all of these things. That's the main thing. Let me just go back to the main meat of this topic. It's 12:30, I see now. What you need to do right now is sort of work on the proposal. And here's the thing I just want to start with. Students often have several ideas of what the thesis is like. I'm going to name 3 of them and just indicate I think they're all wrong. Quite often, students think it's a linear process. Write one chapter, move to the next chapter. Okay. Second, quite often they think it's sequential. Well, why wouldn't you start at the beginning, finish at the end? Lastly, students assume the real big challenge is that, 70 pages, how am I going to write that? In fact, I think those are all wrong misconceptions. It's not linear. You usually have 3 or 4 chapters on the go. You're working on your background chapter, but you're doing your first case study. You've got your theory chapter kind of fleshed out, but as you work on your case study, you start to think, oh, my theory chapter needs some rearrangement. You may have to go look up other scholarship, and that goes into your earlier chapter. So it's sort of a organic mess where you're doing multiple chapters on the same thing. And so therefore you don't actually start at the beginning. You need to pick out what's crucial to start with and sort of accrete around that. And so therefore it's not writing that's the problem. It's sort of conceptually working out, what is this research project about? Okay, and that takes a lot of talking with your advisor. That takes a lot of thinking on your own, takes a lot of reading. And sometimes you go down blind alleys and dead ends. And that's fine. That's normal. That's natural to any research project. You can ask any scholar, okay? They will say, yeah, I managed. If I knew what I knew now, I wouldn't have done X at the time. And that's a standard thing, okay? So that's my point. Having had to be a scholar myself, having sort of nursed a ton of theses, every one of these is basically wrong. It is not linear. It is not sequential. It is not writing. That's the main problem. And that's the point. While the process is messy, it's pretty much looks like you had everything under control from the start. You start with a brief outline. You then discuss what we already know, either past facts or like Professor Owen says, the what are the theories that matter. Then you describe, here's what I'm going to do, okay? And then you actually do what you say you're going to do. And finally, you summarize and finish. And that's what results in the sequence introduction, review of the literature, the research design, or the theory chapter, whatever you end up with, the body chapters, and then conclusion. That's sort of what a thesis normally looks like. And that's sort of because of this sort of How would you present the material to a reader? Um, what really helps here, though, is sort of not just an outline. Chapter one is this, chapter two is chapter three, but what are you sort of trying to do with your thesis? And the way I sort of discuss this is think in terms of storytelling. Okay, what's the story you're trying to tell? For example, is it a big thing illustrated by a small example? For example, you might be interested in a given revolution, say the Arab Spring, and that's fine. Okay, so you can talk about, here's all the theories we have on social movements and revolutions. And then let me bring in this one extra case study. Okay, or you can look at the other way around. There's a huge body of knowledge on a given topic. How do coups happen? And you can say, well, let me just sort of see if my uh, case study sort of conforms to the given theory or not. And so, how are you going to approach a problem? Okay. And again, what's the sequence? Like this is actually the difficulty because there's so many things you want to sort of throw at the reader, but you have to be sequential about it. And therefore you kind of have to work systematically. So right now, what I want you to do is think about what you need as a proposal. I'm telling this to anybody who watches this recording. I have examples of proposals available on my Google Drive. Just email me and say, can I sort of look at these? And we can sort of have a discussion. Here's different ways to basically write a proposal for a faculty member. But what is this all about? Um, Proposals also address that sort of sequence of, what do I know? What do other people know? How am I going to tackle this? But again, you don't know everything. So you're sort of making guesses. This is what I think I'm going to do in the next couple of months to happen. Quite often, they change, your plans change. But what you should know now is you need to contextualize the problem. You need to give a statement of the problem. You need to sort of provide a response to the problem. And let me sort of walk through these to explain what I mean by each of them. Okay, because this is how you're sort of providing your potential advisor. Okay, the student who's asking me has done some preliminary work. Okay, so what I mean by that, basically, two separate aspects. Okay, you have to just provide a background of the facts or history. Just again, I've done some minimal work. Here's what I know about uh, the beginning of sort of, the breakup of Yugoslavia, not to pick on that example, but like that thing. You need to provide background facts, but also give a sense of how the problem's understood. So you're doing, research that will matter to your project. Like this is the minimal thing. Okay, so a proposal should involve a blend of facts. Harbor happened on December 7th. No one's going to contest that. And then you might have, okay, however, scholars differ on how and why it happened, why the US didn't respond, immediately. So that's okay. Facts are there, but interpretation of facts start to differ. And you have to sort of indicate, I know this. I've done some preliminary work. The first part is pretty easy. The second part, you have to really talk to your advisor who can sort of point out, here's the main ideas or theories you might want to hit on. So that's the contextualized problem. This is harder to do, okay? Sometimes students pick, cutting edge topics, and that's really hard to do. I kind of recommend against that because there's not enough work out there, okay? But some problems are really well studied, and it might be hard to cover everything already known. I don't mind those sort of projects. There's always something you can add to something that everybody studies. That's fine. But again, I would recommend not cutting edge as in like current history problems, okay? How you deal with your case is also contextual, because again, you can sort of, how is this an important topic? How can you locate your interest in a bigger picture? Um, Basically, what I'm saying is being able to give an advisor, I've done the preliminary work, reassures them, okay, I'm not starting from scratch. Okay, you've done some initial work. And again, you kind of understand, okay, there's all this scholarship out there. I have to disagree with all of it. Here's my perspective. And that's daring, but why not try that? Okay. And again, sometimes being able to sort of say, what am I trying to do also gives you a sense of, okay, narrow down your project a little more clearly. This is what I need to know to make the argument I'm going to try to make, which is the next point I have, giving your statement of the problem. By this, I'm just sort of pointing out, here's the topic I want to focus on. Let me tell you what other people have done. Now, then you have to turn to, here's what I'm going to do. Okay. And this is why it's actually difficult. It's not the writing, it's the thinking, where's my value added to this research project? What's the question or questions you want to answer? Basically, that's it. And that's really difficult, actually. Okay. You can fire a bunch of open-ended questions. Why did this happen? Who did it? When, why? But in fact, um, what you want to do is sort of make a statement. Okay. Here's my thesis. This happened because of these reasons. And so you can start with, why did this happen? But you kind of have to have a thesis at the end of your thesis. Sometimes you don't know this at the start, okay? But here's the thing I can tell you. Don't sort of write in your proposal open-ended questions. For example, can I explain how and why US-Canada salmon negotiations had periods of failure and success? My response to a student who asks me that is, I don't know. Can you? Like, help me help you. And so if you can sort of turn it around, it's phrase the problem in a way that also gives an idea how to answer the question. For example, is it possible to combine historic and game theoretic approaches such that the process of negotiation will reveal any patterns? And I use this because there actually is on my bookshelf a student who said, I just took a course on game theory. I'm fascinated by this idea. Can we come up with some way to map out, what the Canadians wanted, what the Americans wanted, what third-party players wanted by sort of picking out game theory? And, okay, let's see if we can. And it works. Okay. So that's the point. If you know how you want to contextualize the problem, this is the point. So don't have an open-ended question. Alternatively, okay, your topic can be huge, but a narrow question can help you focus. Again, if you're studying the EU and the concept of national sovereignty, you can ask, is the EU changing the ways we think about sovereignty? And again, it's either yes, no, maybe, and that's not helpful. Okay, so why don't we restate this? Just think: do the current category scholars use to analyze sub-state national movements suffice? Are they suffice, or is there a new way to think about the legal concept? And that sort of turns it around. You're now saying, I need to look at what other scholars think, and I have to figure out, is what's going on in Catalonia or in Northern Ireland, does that fit the models we have, or do I need to come up with a new way of thinking about what makes something sovereign? And again, that just lets you sort of narrow your topic. And so that's the point. Proposals address this, okay? And let me just go now to the last one. So having sort of closed the open-endedness of a question, provide a response. And by that, I just simply mean, okay, well, how are you going to tackle this? Okay, so again, close the open-endedness, but then now you need to elaborate on this. Okay, so you have to now explain, well, okay, having said, our current models of sovereignty sufficient? Well, you have to say, I need to sort of do these next steps, find out what the current models are, look at the critics of them, okay, and then sort of think, and then how do I judge? Or whatever their topic is. And this is not just indicating data exists or there's books and articles. I mean, that's a part of it. Coming up with the literature you need to sort of master. But then it's really how you use them is what matters. Okay. So you have to provide a sort of framework. This is the way I'm going to systematically tackle this problem over several chapters. You can start with, here's what other studies have done and, how I'm using them. And you can also then explain what I call boundary conditions. You can say this is about revolutions, but not every and all revolutions. Is it geographically limited? Is the time span limited? What's the degree of applicability? Like, this is a study about this one incident in this one country, and that's all it's meant to be. Okay. Others can have this sort of broader sort of approach. And again, all of these are fine, but set your sort of boundary conditions. And generally, my point is don't make your topic too broad, too ambitious. Find that right zone. Okay. And so clarify as much as you can everywhere you can in this proposal. Just try to say, this is what I'm trying to do. Okay. Because at least then your advisor or potential advisor sort of goes, okay, we may have to rein it back a bit, or, why don't we try a little bit more ambition here? Let's do this on top. So the proposal, okay, this will change. Trust me, that's the main thing you need to know. All right. And that's fine. But you sort of have to have a game plan at the start, and that's what's the key thing. You need to secure an advisor by showing you do have a game plan. Okay. And that's what I'm trying to get at. You need to at least show your advisor, I've got this under control, sort of. Okay. Because what we don't want to know is, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, don't start there. You're going to get a no. Okay. Come back when you sort of have a game plan. All right. Um, so with that in mind, I just want to stop there. Again, it's 12:40. I had to sort of kept this in mind because I want to turn it over to Professor Owens if he wants to talk about other aspects of this. I also want to turn it over to we've only got two of you now. Any questions you have, that way, hopefully other students who do listen to this can come in and understand what's ahead of them. So let me just stop there. Professor Owens, anything to add to this? Oh, sorry, you're okay. Well, let me just then turn over to Ellie and Kaylin. Any questions, or this more or less for now got you under control? For okay. What I
I think
need,
it,
yeah. Sorry.
oh, I was just gonna ask if you could maybe go over like what it would entail theoretically looking into a scholar of the college thesis, like what that process is.
Okay, you can go online, bc.edu, then space, and then just type in Scholar College. It will bring up a website. Basically, what it is students with a cumulative 3.700 GPA. You have to have that GPA at the start of your senior year. If you have that, you can then ask to be a scholar of the college. What you need to do vis-a-vis your advisor, though, is sort of come up with, here's a research project I have that's substantive in what it tries to approach, what it tries to answer. Because what you're trying to show is what I'm doing is above and beyond just a normal undergraduate thesis. I can sort of show you examples of theses. Unfortunately, you're not on campus at the moment. There are some actually available. Um, BC Library keeps a repository of theses. I'm just going to open up another window here, which students will see. If you go to BC EDU e-scholarship, that's not the you can sort of see here, there's undergraduate work, and you can sort of, a lot of students don't upload their theses, which, that's fine. I'm kind of annoyed by that, but like last year, I think one or two only did. So yeah, she did in 24, and she's embargoed it. You can't see this, okay? Um, Again, here's a thesis. And you can sort of see, I don't recall if this was Scholar College. It wasn't. Okay. There's basically another signature down there. Quite a bit further, I know there is one. Um, and basically it's quite a while back, actually. Let me just see if I can get to it when there is one. This was a Scholar College. Um, and of course I can't download it. I believe Garrett Lau was as well. Let me just check. Yes. Again, you can tell because there was a second reader. So Professor Scary looked at it. And again, it's not that, and you can hit this, download it, and take a look at it. So again, it's 142 pages, so it wasn't mega massive, but it was substantive. And basically, you have to sort of show what I'm doing is, you know, pushing yourself harder. We're going to give you 9 credits or 12 credits. Prove it to us that you're deserving of this. And so you can sort of see, let me just get to the table of contents. Again, the background. Here's what you need to know about them. Here's sort of the theory section, how to, frame disadvantage. And then he's got some different chapters, and then he shuts up. So this is quite tight, but again, it took a lot of pages in each chapter. Okay, so let me just hide that. But yeah, basically, my answer is for the Scholar College, go to the actual website for this to get the details. You can also talk to me. We can sort of walk through the process. But again, that requires you nailing an advisor sooner than later, just so we hit the ground running, because I need to convert you into the Scholar College project during drop ad. Any other question, Ellie or Kaylin?
No, I don't think I have anything that was really comprehensive. Thank you.
I mean, for now, it was comprehensive.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
of course.
you're going to come up with more questions as the process goes. Um, if I can sort of piggyback Professor Owens, and I will let you go. I think this is actually worthwhile. Students who have done theses have said it does make them stick out during job interviews. Quite often, if you get to the interview stage, they'll say, "I see you wrote a thesis," because again, even though like a third to a three-quarters of our students, sorry, a third to a quarter of our students write theses. Um, and that's a large number. Of the bigger BC population, there's not a lot of thesis writers. And so right there, that makes you stick out. And there's that sort of plus. Two, as Professor Owen says, if you are a procrastinator, this will teach you, maybe either a thesis is not for you, which is one thing you learn, or you learn how not to procrastinate, which is also a plus. It's a good skill set. You can just not simply say, I wrote a thesis, but you can list all the other sort of follow-ons that are implied by having to do, a thesis. Good time management skills, good writing skills, good editing skills, and they're different. Sorry, I've been talking nonstop, but all of this sort of, adds on. Now, having said that, a thesis is a lot of work. A scholarly college, even more so. And I'm honest to my students, even though, like Professor Owens, I mentioned this as an option, I will point out a senior seminar and a fourth elective way easier. But the other part I mentioned is we're all scholars because we love doing this. That's why we're all professors. Sure, we teach, but a lot of us also do scholarship. And that's kind of the point. We love to sort of convey our excitement, our love of doing this. And that's something, hopefully you will, as junior scholars, also pick up. This can be fun. It's frustrating, but it's fun.
It's
Okay.
very satisfying for students for them. There's some angst periods written into it, but it can be very satisfying too. Okay, thank you so much, Professor Nakazato. Thank you, guys, Kaylin and Ellie and Evie and others, for joining us. We're happy to answer questions, in the next few weeks as you're locking in on this. But I hope this was helpful. There's tons of information on our website under the academics section, then the thesis tab, and there's just most of this information is there as well, so you can review it at your leisure. Thanks so much.
With that, we're going to shut this down. Thank you for joining us.